Welcome. In this tutorial we're going to be going through how you can set up a character selection. It's going to be fairly simple but still be both scalable and modular and will be very easy to build on further and is pretty clean as well. It doesn't have a whole lot of code and no knickknacks. So what we see here is essentially the created, crafted character selection that we have. We simulate having a main menu because we don't actually have a main menu, so we just throw out the character selection immediately. And we have 3 different characters to select from. And once we choose one of these characters, we're going to make sure that the game instance keep this information so it persists for us, so we can travel to a completely different level, and then we'll have a unique character depending on which character that we chose, which then spawns in on that level. So that's what we will be creating today. So here we are inside of an Unreal Engine 5.3 version project. The only thing that I've done in this project is that in the content folder I have created a folder called character selection and added some images to use for the character selection. This is based on or made from a third-person template, meaning that if we were to play, we have a third-person character that we can run around with. It doesn't really matter what kind of project you have. It is completely indifferent to it, essentially. But yeah, so starting off, what we want to do. We want to create a character selection screen. So let's start off with actually doing that. So we'll go to user interface and widget blueprint, and we'll click a user widget. We'll name it w_character selection, something like that. So this will represent the widget that we will present to the player, where they can make a selection of characters, essentially. So inside of this one, we're going to keep it fairly simple. We're going to be, in this case, again, canvas panels should be used sparingly. I'm just using this for simplicity's sake here, to display how different things are going to be organized in relation to each other. So inside of a canvas panel, we want to have our different characters to select. Now you could start off with doing something like taking buttons, just placing buttons here and having them be certain sizes for the different characters, something like that. Copy paste, have 2 buttons, and then hook onto these on clicked events, and then just from here you just write your code here and then duplicate your code over here. This is a bit of a rookie move, of course, because not only will we get duplicated code, we will also be limiting the scalability of this character selection already. So we don't want to do anything like that. So we're going to get rid of both of these buttons and these click events because we don't need them like so. What we instead are going to do to keep our modularity up is create a widget for our actual character selection individuality. So we'll make another user interface, another user widget. We'll call this one w_character select. So this will represent one selection of a character. Opening that up, we can now structure how we want this to look. So we will keep it fairly simple. We'll do something like a vertical box so that we can place a few different objects within it and have it structured in a way we want it. We could put a size box inside of it so we can determine a little bit how much space we want it to take up. So the size box, we could already override the width and the height and do something like, I don't know, 300 pixel width and 500 pixel height, something like that. And then we do click over here and decide on screen, and we'll get the actual screen space it will be taking up once it's done then. Inside of this we can put something like an overlay. An overlay will allow us to put objects with different positions within them so that we can have this space out with different parts in different areas if we wanted to later on. For now we don't really need too much of this, but we're gonna have an image to begin with. An image in the overlay to have as a visual representation for the images that I imported. So if you want to use an image here, you can do that. Again, the representation of how your character selection is going to look doesn't really matter all that much. You could have a turntable of characters, you could have a bunch of different images for character selection. The visuals of it is not that important. There would be some minor differences here and there, of course, but it's not the main focus on this. So for now, we're going to take this image, we're going to fill it in both axes. That way we'll take up all of the space, and we're going to add a button to this. So adding a button will allow us to make sure that we have an event to interact with on this character selection. We'll make sure that it's also covering everything. So now it's gray on top of the white, which means that it's a button on top of the image, which is what we want. We want to go to background color here and set the alpha to 0 so that we see the image below. So it will essentially be a invisible button on top that will be listening for clicks for us to interact with. In addition to that, we can also take a text or something like that, and we can add it to the vertical box, and we can center this, and we can call this something like character selection text. We'll click it as a variable. We'll go to the image and we'll call this character selection image. So now we have two different variables that we can interact with in here. So moving on, we want to actually be able to fill these things. So what we'll do is we'll go to our graph and we want to remove our pre-construct and we want to remove our tick. In here we want to essentially say we want to set our values to be whatever character that is supposed to be here. So how do we get that character? Because now we have made a widget that is, if we do it like this, we compile, save, make sure to compile and save this one as well. And in our character selection one, we can go to user created now. We can drag in a character select, for example. So if we were to drag them in like this, this is what they're going to be looking at like right now. If we take size to content, they're going to be having the size that they are actually going to be. But what we want inside of these is we want an ability to easily populate data inside of these character selection widgets. And how we can do that is by expanding on modularity again and scalability and create a data table. So we'll have a data table as sort of our lookup for the information, and then we'll just reference these widgets to have that data table reference so that it knows, I'm this specific thing. So to start off, we need to create a structure for that. So we'll go to blueprints and we go to structure. Call this s_character selection. There we go. And to this we want to add a few different variables. We can add 2 of them for now. The first one we want to add is going to be of the pawn class reference. So we go to pawn and get the class reference, which is the purple one. This one will be our selected character class. The second one, we can have something like a description, so we can have the type text, so it can be localized as well if you wanted to. And we can call this, let's just call it description. The third one, we can have as our image that we created, so we'll go in here and we'll type in texture 2D. Make it an object reference, and we can just call this image. Now, with that done, we have our structure completed, so we can close this. We can open up our content folder, we right-click and go to miscellaneous, and we go to our data table, and we say that we want to have a row structure of the character selection we just created. We click OK, we call this dt_character selection. So, in this case, we want to have 3 different characters. We want to have Luke, Leia, and Vader as our 3 different characters. So let's click on the first row, and we call that one Luke. And as a class, we don't have one right now. So let's start creating some classes. We'll open up our content folder, go to third person folder, and inside of blueprints we have a third person character blueprint. In this case, let's assume that we have something like 3 different characters that all have similar behavior but slightly different behavior. So we have this as our parent class with all the unified behavior, and then we have some child classes for all the different classes that we can use. So in this case, we'll just create a child of this blueprint class. We can call this BP_Luke, and we'll create a duplicate of that one and call that one Leia, and we'll create a duplicate of that one and call it Vader. So now we have 3 different characters that are children of the third person character blueprint. Okay, these characters now, just to make them a little bit different from each other, we're gonna go into the Leia one, and inside of this one, if we open the blueprint editor and the viewport, we can see that it looks like this. To make it look a little bit different, we can take one of these materials and choose something different, maybe pink for this one. So the pink one here will be Leia in this case. We'll make sure to save it and close it down. This is just to make it visually different, so we can see that we're actually getting the characters that we're choosing later on. So Luke, we can go and let's change the first element and go for something like, I don't know, what colors do we have? Let's take something yellow. So that will be our Luke character. And lastly, we'll take our Vader character and we'll change up the first material, and we'll pick something that's black like this, viewport. So this is what Vader looks like. So now we have 3 distinctly different visually looking characters at least. So back in our data table, we have Luke now. We can say that we want to have BP Luke, and we want a description that says, well, Luke. We can choose an image. In this case, I've imported Luke, Leia, and Vader textures. So if you want to do the same, you can do the same, or have whatever you want to have in yours. We'll make the second character, which is Leia. We're going to choose the Leia blueprint. We're going to have a description that says Leia, and we're going to have an image that is of Leia. Lastly, we're going to rename by pressing F2 if I didn't mention that. Vader, and then you have the Vader character, and we call it Vader, and then we have Vader image over there. So now we have created the data table as our sort of lookup for our information. So now we're done with that, so now we can close that down. Going back to our character select now, we want to read out this data. So what we want to do is create a variable to allow us to get this data. So we'll create a character data, let's call it. And this is going to be of the type data table row handle, and saving it like so. And inside of this one, you can see that we can choose a data table here, and we can choose a row name, and the row name doesn't show up unless we choose a data table. If we choose a data table like this, we can see what values that we have available from that data table. So to make this a little bit clean and avoid some code application, we're going to be creating a function now to get this information. We're going to call this function just get data. Simple enough. Inside of this one, we're going to be taking this character data and getting it, and then we're going to say we want to break it, and then we want to right click and get data table row like so, and now we can choose which table to read and what row name to read. We're not going to be taking this data table, and the reason for that is if we just choose a data table here and a row name here, this output here is a wildcard. It doesn't specifically know what information is inside of it. If we disconnect the data table and make sure that we're using the character selection one, this output row will be of a specific type, and it knows that these are the different variables that it will have available as readable. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have the data table hard-coded like this, and then just have the row name dynamic like so. Then we'll create a return node, and we'll say that if we have found the row, we're going to return the class, the description, the image. And if we do not find the row, everything is going to be blank. Okay, now going back to our code, we can say in our construct here, we can say we want to get the data. Just calling get data now, or actually just dragging it out like so, will give us a function that is not pure, which is just something that I prefer to do when you're just reading information. You want to keep it pure generally. So we're going to go back into the function, click on it somewhere, like on the return node, and then click the checkbox for pure, compile, save, go back. It is now a pure data reading node. From here, we can say that, okay, we get this information. How do we want to make use of it? Well, we have our character, let's see, character selection text. We can get that variable, and we can say set text. So the set text node, and it takes in a text. So we'll just send in the description. From here, we also want to show the image, so we'll take the character selection image, and we set this brush by texture, or set brush from texture is what it's called. And it takes a texture, so we'll send in the image that we have. And now we should, when this widget is created, be setting these variables immediately. However, this character data information over here is currently local. It only exists within the widget. We want it to be exposed so it's editable outside. So we'll click on the little eye over here so it opens up. That way it's exposed, and we can show this by going to our character selection. Clicking on one of these widgets now, you can see that we have on the default here, we have a character data available, which is the data table and the row name that we spoke about earlier. So that's good. So that means that we can just go in here and click on one of these ones and say that I want this one to be Luke, I want this one to be Vader, and I want this one to be Leia. And it's very easy to expand upon this also, because later on, if you want to add characters, you just add characters and then add them to the data table, add another character selection here. So it's super easy to scale. From this, we want to continue and actually have some functionality as well now. So in our character select, we created a button. We created it and we call it 84, so we can rename this to selected button. And if we go back to the graph, actually here on, if you have the button selected, you can click on the plus icon and we'll get an event for it. So this means that this character has been clicked. So now we want to convey that this character has been selected. Now, who might this be of interest to? Well, we want to store it somehow, because we're going to be taking this character from our, supposedly our menu screen, which is going to be one level, and then into our first starting level. So we will be opening a completely different level, and opening a new level means that we will break down all the information that is on this level, and nothing will be saved until the next one. So how do we make that persist between levels that we've made this selection? Well, we have two different options. One of the options is we can make use of save game. We can actually save to a save game that this is going to be our character that we have selected, and then when we enter the new world we can load that save game. Another option is to make use of a game instance. A game instance is the only Blueprint class that lives throughout the whole playing session. So let's make use of a game instance to store this information. To reach our game instance, we can go to Edit and Project Settings, and you can see that we have here under Maps and Modes something called a game instance. We want to create a new one because this one is the default one. Clicking on the plus will allow us to create a new one, and we can choose to save it in the character selection just to have everything organized together. We'll call this BP_game instance, like so. Saving it. So now we're inside of the game instance. So we want to save the information here of the class. So we want to say that selected character is a variable that we want to save, and it should be of the type pawn, and it should be of the type class reference, because that is what we're saving. Now we want to be able to access this information somehow. We want to be able to set it from the character selection, and we want to read it somewhere else. So how do we do that then? Well, we could do some casts and stuff like that, or we could make it a little bit more clean and skip some dependencies. So inside of our character selection, you can right click, go to blueprints, create a blueprint interface. We'll call it BPI underscore character selection. Double click to open that up. And here we can create a function called get selected character, and then we'll create a return from that one, which is going to be of the type pawn and pawn class reference, and we'll say selected character class. So this will be what we return from this. We have another function which we call set selected character. And this one, in difference from the other one, will just have an input which we call the selected character class, like so. So now we have an interface where we can set and get this information. So that's all we need here, so we'll close that one down. We'll go back to our game instance, we'll go to class settings, we'll go to our implemented interfaces and see there's nothing here, but we'll add one. So we'll add our BPI character selection that we have over here, which allows these two interface methods to appear. We'll right click on the first one, implement it, say in set selected character, we want to set this variable that we have over here. Compile and save, then we open up the other one and say opening graph, and from here we say we want to return this character selection that we have. So now we have created in our game instance the ability to save over this information and read it out when we want to. So that's all we want from the game instance, so we are now done with it and can close it down. We can close the project settings as well. So inside of the click here, we can now say that, okay, we have selected a character. Which character have we selected? Well, the one that we actually clicked on, because this is a widget which represents it, right? So we will do the get data again, like so, and then we want to get our game instance, so we right click and get game instance, like so, and then we say in the get game instance we want to set selected character, and the character class that it wants as an input is going to be this get data character that we have from the data table, which means that we're done here now theoretically. But let's say we wanted to place the information here also that immediately when we select on a character we want to start the game. This is normally not what you want to do. You do it from the menu when you say like start game or something like that. But in this case, since I don't have a main menu created, let's keep this a bit tutorial a little bit short by not creating a lot of extraneous things. We'll just add the functionality here. So we'll create an open level by name, and here we can name a level that we want to open. Currently we do not have a different level, we only have the third person map here. But if we go to our map folder in the third person, you can see here, if we right click we can't duplicate it because we're currently in and editing this one. So we'll just go to File, Save Current Level As. We'll go to, actually let's put it in the same folder structure here, so in Maps. And let's call this one Other Map or something. So Other Map, save like that. Okay, so now we're in the other map, but let's go to our third person map, because this is what represents or is supposed to be our main menu it's representing. I'm doing quotation marks in the air here. You can't see that, but I'm totally doing that. So this will be our main menu, and the other map is supposed to be our starting level. So going back to our character select now, we can say that the other level, or the level name here, is what we're going to be moving to. So I'm going to type in other map. This is case sensitive to make sure that you name it exactly like you have named the map or level. Now, with that done, once we select now, we should be traveling to that part. So we lack the ability to interact with this so far, because we don't actually see this this menu or this character selection at any point. So to simulate that we have a main menu, we're going to go to Blueprint for our third-person character, which is the character that we spawn in as on this third-person map when we click play here. This is the third-person character, because it didn't have any different colors, right? So third-person character. Inside of that one, let's create a simple event just to have something that simulates our main menu being shown. So we'll just right-click and type in keyboard and 1, and so on the 1 key we're gonna be creating a main menu to show. So we'll right-click and create widgets like so. We'll make it of the type character selection, because character selection is the one that has all the selections inside of it. Then we want to, theoretically, we also want to keep track of our player controller, which we can see over here. It's getting the controller, casting it to player controller. So we probably want to save this one as well, so we can make use of it as a reference later. So we'll just be right-clicking here, promote to variable, hooking it up like so that it's doing all of this, and then we'll call this variable player controller ref. Okay, so now we have a player controller ref, and the player controller ref is what we want to send into our character selection, just to be neat, tidy, and organized, like so. And then we want to stop the input of the character, because we're supposed to be a menu, right? So we're gonna set the input mode to be UI only, like so. And our player controller is over here. Widget we want to focus on is this one we just created, and then we want to add this to the viewport. So we're gonna drag off from here and add viewport, like so. Hook it up, and then double click to create a reroute node to make it a little bit tidier, like so. Okay, so now if we were to start playing, we can see that by pressing 1 we get our character selection, and we have our different characters that we created, and we can see that it has read out the names, Leia, Luke, and Vader, and the different corresponding images for these. So it's all working as expected from the data table now. And if we were to click on one of these, nothing seems to really be happening. We are out of control and currently can't do anything, right? So, there we go. Now, even though we have set the character in the game instance that if we go to our character select, we have set the character in the game instance, we're not actually reading this out at any point now, right? What we want to do is essentially when we get to this new map, the other map, we want to say that when we start playing here, and this map is identical to the other one since we just saved when we were in the third person map, we want to say that we want to play as that character. Now, this map doesn't know anything about it, and what we could do if we wanted to be a little bit novice is we could go to the level blueprint, and we could say something like begin play here. We can like spawn our character and stuff like that. But first of all, you should almost never use the level blueprint. It's for very rare uses. You shouldn't be using it as a crutch. It usually leads to bad things. And what we really should be doing is essentially just saying make use of functionality that already exists in the engine, right? In the case, if we go over here to our world settings, we are now in the other map. We can see that we have a game mode override called BP third person here. If we open up our blueprints in our third person character, we can see that we have the BP third person game mode over here. Double click. You can see here it's the game mode. The game mode here, if we expand it a little bit, this is the game mode that exists in both of these levels. It's the default game mode. And how this one works is, this one can determine a lot of different things of functionality for you. Among other things, the pawn that you want to be playing as. If we go to our functions here, we can click on the override, and we can see that there are a bunch of functions here available to us. One of them is the get default pawn class 4 controller. If we click on this one, we can see that we get the following. We have a get default pawn class for controller, and then it's calling its parent to see what it gets as a class over there, and then it says that this is the pawn it's supposed to be using. In our case, we can make a little bit of an exception here, because if we do a get game instance and we choose to get selected character, we get this function node that we created earlier from our interface. We can say that we want to execute this instead, and we can say that if this class is valid, and have a branch for it, like so, then we can say that, okay, well, if it is valid, then we want to return. Let's actually do it this way so it's a little bit clearer. So when it is valid, we want to make use of whatever we have saved in our game instance. So we'll do it like so. Reroute a little bit. And if it is not valid, so we haven't set anything in the game mode, we want to make sure that we're using whatever is the default by the game mode already, right? So we don't actually break anything. Like so. So this game mode exists in both maps, so it's not going to be a problem in the case when we are when we're starting at the third person game map. When we press play over here, we're getting this character because this is what we don't have anything in the game instance right now saying that this is our selected character, which means we get the default one, which is set up inside of the settings for this game mode, which is going to be the third person character blueprint right here, right? But now that we're in here and we press 1 and we get our character selection and press on Vader, you can see that we get teleported to the other map, and inside of here we have our new character, which is black like the character we assigned in our data table. So it has properly loaded in that character inside of here. So now that works and we can do the whole transition thing, right? The only thing that remains now is that we don't have the control of our character when we come to the new level. And the reason for that is because when we choose to, in our third person character, we set the game mode, the input mode to be UI only. This still persists. If we go to our character select, we can make sure that we actually get that back just before we transition to our new level. So if we just right click and get owning player, like so, and then we say that we want to set mode game only, like so, and then run, and then we have our menu and we click our character and we're in the new level and we can run around like normal. So that's essentially the whole character selection bit all wrapped up. So let's just reiterate on what we've done. We have created or imported our images to have for our character selection. We have created our game instance, which has a user interface, an interface in it to allow us to save the variable of our selected characters. We have a get and a set for it. We have created that interface, which is called BPI character selection, which just has those two methods in it. We created a data table that holds the information of the different characters that we want to be able to select. We have created a structure that has the structure of data for that data table. We have created a character select widget, which is going to be the overarching one. And of course, this one doesn't look super pretty because it's just sketchily put together to show you the functionality. But this is the main character selection widget that you will be showing when you have your characters available to be shown. And we also have the individual character select widget, which is the widget which represents one of these character selections and has a exposed variable for the what's it called? Let's go over here so I can actually find it. So the character data. And the character data itself is used in the widget over here to read from the data table. and read out the information that it wants to provide it back to us so that we can, when the widget is constructed, set that information in the form of text and an image, and also when we click on it to set the selected class inside of the game instance, so that the game instance can keep that class alive for us until we reach to the new level, which we open over here. So I hope that this was sensible to you and you were able to learn a lot. That's going to be all for now. Keep on learning. Take care. A big thank you to all of you who like, comment, subscribe and share my videos, or through other means support this channel. You are what makes this channel grow and become a resource for other people to learn from.